a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause the Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Stag Brewing. Now in a liquor store near you, you lucky people. I am John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of the Geek.
Hello, John. We haven't quit video. We did a week, and we decided to come back for more.
We did.
The reaction was pretty good. I will tell you that I was going into Target Field yesterday for the last game of the homestand, and a security guard gentleman, I don't think I know, but he said, "Hey, Aaron," and I said, "Hi," and he said, "Hey, I've been watching the YouTube," and I thought, "Great." And he said to tell you specifically, John.
Me specifically, all right.
That both of us are not nearly as bad looking as we say we are. So we have
especially now that we're dressing in true classic tees. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So we have like the 55-year-old Target Field security guard demo like wrapped
locked
up.
in. Sure.
The rest of the people, I don't know. So we have a lot to talk about, actually, from a Twins front. Since last we spoke, they had the entire homestand, basically. They were swept by the Brewers, which we'll talk some about that, but we covered that on the Patreon, the sadness of that. I believe we called it.
We don't want to relive it too many times.
Yeah, we called it the Ufta and Oy Vey series. If that gives you a sense of how we were talking about it on the Patreon. But then they split with the Seattle Mariners. They lose the first 2 out of 3, and then I was worried because I spent 11 hours at the ballpark yesterday, and
we were feeling for you because I was with a number of your fellow beat writers who had the day off because we were going to go see the Killers concert in St. Paul. We didn't want to get stuck in a rain delay, and sure enough, there was a long rain delay, and we thought we were taking bets on what Aaron Gleeman's mood would be like coming into this, given on the one hand, he was at the ballpark for about 11 and a half hours, and B, they won 10-0. Like, they had a nice little offensive explosion to kind of ease the pain a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was they said it was the second longest rain delay in the history of Target Field. It was like a little less than 4.5 hours, I think, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got there right before like 10 a.m. to do like the pregame stuff, and then I got home at, I don't even know, 8 or something like that.
Right, yeah.
So 8:30, I don't know. It was bad. I'm glad they played it. It got to a point where people were starting to look up the mutual off days that the Mariners and the Twins have, and there's like 3 of them the rest of the season, including one in a couple weeks. But because it was a noon game initially, and because the Twins were going to Detroit, and then Seattle wasn't going back to Seattle, they were going to Texas, which, not that that's a short flight, but it's a shorter flight. Going to Detroit is definitely a short flight for the Twins. There was more willingness, I think, to like wait it out, and to end up starting at 4:30 or whatever it ended up being wasn't so bad. I mean, it's a tricky situation. As much as I would like to make this about me, as usual, it is the first name in the title of the show, but I just sat there and ate too much trail mix and popcorn and gossiped with my fellow writers and everything like that. So it was fine, but
that's not much different than your regular day, truth be told.
Yes, correct.
It's usually via text as opposed to in person.
That's exactly right. I'm a messy bee who loves to gossip, as I say. But I felt for the players in general, because they just got to sit around and then be ready. But specifically Simeon Woods Richardson, who was the starting pitcher for the Twins, he got there at 9 a.m. probably, and he was trying to lock in mentally and physically, but for his start. And, starting pitchers on the day they start, they don't really interact with too many people. A lot of them just put headphones on and kind of stare off into space and sit in their locker by themselves. You're trying to not only kind of hype yourself up, but you just want to get into a kind of a zone. But that's hard to do when you start that at 9:30 and the first pitch is thrown at 4:40. Nobody can stay at that kind of zone for that long. I think he even said afterward, I went kind of in and out, and I had to sort of restart my pre-start routine several times, because if I would have tried to lock in for 6 hours, I would have taken the mound already like mentally exhausted and maybe even physically exhausted. But he ended up handling it brilliantly and had one of his better games, certainly this season. But I would put that up against, his top 5 games overall over the last 2 seasons.
I would say, first of all, I think we'll probably get back to this, but I think that's his 3rd good game in a row. The second one didn't look like a good game, but that was because there was just so many defensive miscues on that, especially around third base, that I thought now that's the 3rd encouraging in a row I've seen from Simeon Woods Richardson, which is big. Like they just need that. They just need encouraging starts in a row by 4 of their pitchers. And then the other one I was wondering about is so that was for those of you who were not paying a lot of attention to the weather or to the game yesterday, the game was supposed to start at noon, and about 12:30 it was supposed to start pouring. But from 12 to 12:30 it was, relatively dry. It had been raining in the morning, but it was relatively dry. And I wondered if they would try to get 2 innings in just so they could try and do something. And then that made me think, I wonder if they would do an opener.
Right.
Like would the Twins consider, and then that made me wonder, how late can they decide that they're going to switch their starting pitchers? Like at what point does it become official in the, do they have to decide by 10 a.m. that if they were going to have a different starting pitcher than they have on the mound? I didn't know how Major League Baseball covered that.
Well, especially if the change, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I know that there's sort of an agreement between teams that you won't switch it at the last minute.
Right.
The way you do see switches at the last minute are injury related. Somebody warms up and their hamstring feels tight or their elbow feels tight, but obviously you can't make that excuse and then also try to use Simeon Woods Richardson for 5 innings. So that would have been a little bit tricky, but that was to sit through all of that and not win would have been very annoying. And it also would have been the 8th series loss out of 9 for them. And instead they get the split. Right. And the last game ends up, they kind of break through against Zach Pop, which has had one of the worst relief appearances I've ever seen.
His defense did not help him much either, by the way.
Well, there was one bad play, but he was
bad.
The
Rosarina one was egregious as well. He broke in on that ball. He should have been able to catch that ball.
All right. Well, John's the charter member of the Zach Pop fan club now. Trying to the guy gave up 8 runs and before he got 2 outs or whatever. So the Twins broke it open. So it wasn't a good homestand. Obviously, you get swept by the Brewers. You split 4 against the Mariners. They're now at the exact midpoint of the season. 81 games played, 81 games to go. They're 39-42, which that's not good. Obviously, you have one good series instead of one bad series, and you're essentially just 500. Not that 500 would be celebrated either, but 500 is certainly still within, even 39-42, which is below 500. You're still within only a few games of the final wild card spot, but that's not necessarily a credit to the Twins so much as just that's how the wild card setup is almost always going to be halfway through a season. Like you really have to work to not be at least on the fringes of the playoff picture 81 games into a season with 6 playoff teams. So the Twins are there. They've been passed by several teams now over the last couple of weeks in the sort of second tier of wild card hopefuls.
Yes.
So it's not a great place to be, but you got 81 of them left. And although I do, and we kind of talked about this on the last show, but I do keep going back to, first of all, the up and down nature, the roller coaster nature of the season is something we've documented pretty much every day we've done an episode. But 39-42, you do the quick math on that, the California math, as Bert Blyleven used to like to say, and that is 26-42 outside of the 13-game winning streak. And look, if we're being, fair, I guess, you remove every team's best stretch,
of course,
you're going to get a much worse record, obviously. But
especially when that best stretch is a 13-game winning streak.
Correct.
That's a pretty good best stretch.
But the goal here would have been, wow, you had a 13-game winning streak and you played 500 baseball for the rest of that. Outside of the 13-game winning streak. Instead, 26-42 is pretty bad. 26-42 is one of the worst records in baseball. And I'm not discounting the 13-game streak any more than I'm discounting, any 13-game stretch of the season. But, it does create a lot of questions at the exact midpoint of the season for what these next and these last 81 games are going to look like. And, we talked on the last Patreon, which people can now see the Patreon link at the bottom of the screen here. Feel free to click that.
Sure.
We do Monday and Wednesday episodes commercial free exclusively for Patreon subscribers. And we talk a lot. We talked about the Brewers series a lot. We also had a great guest this week on Wednesday.
Yeah.
We had Audra Martin, the sideline reporter for Twins TV and also the studio host for Wild broadcast. She was an awesome. We knew she would be a good guest because we both know Audra pretty well. And she was fantastic. Told a bunch of good stories.
I regret to inform our viewers that it was not video; it was just audio.
Yeah,
she was great.
She was very pleased with the reaction that the video or the podcast got. A bunch of people came up to her the next couple of days at the ballpark, so that's always good to hear that people enjoyed it. So yeah, you can get that too on Patreon. But we just kind of talked about the fact we don't know what this team is. I mean, I don't know what. I'm sure there are many Twins fans who, having watched the last month since the winning streak ended, where they've been, 13-22 or something like that, who are pretty convinced this is just not a good team. And I guess I would sort of lean more towards that end than the other end, but I'm not entirely convinced of that either, because
right.
I have a hard time believing that a truly awful team is even capable of winning 13 in a row.
Right.
And, while you can slice and dice 81 games like I just did, before the streak, during the streak, after the streak, the truth is 39-42 is most likely going to be the most predictive, slice. The biggest slice is going to be the most predictive one. And I sort of, they haven't played like a 500 team really at any point. They've either been terrible, unbeatable, or very bad. But if it kind of comes out in the wash at 39-42, I guess at some point I'm willing to just sit here and go, yeah, they're a mediocre or slightly below average team.
Yeah, I mean, we were at the Killers concert in St. Paul last night, and I had several different listeners walk up to me and say, "What is this team?" At the same way that we're doing, the same way that we did the end of last summer, when they were 17 games above 500 in the middle of August, and then they ended up limping their way to the finish, blowing a chance to make the postseason. We kept waiting for them to come out of a tailspin that they never came out of, right to the last week, where we were just like, if they can win 2 out of 3 in Boston, they can maybe salvage the season here, right the ship before they never were able to do it. Then they started
that last homestand.
Right. Yeah.
They could, if they just don't completely fall flat and that you win 2 or 3 of those
versus the Marlins, right? That was the Marlins. Yeah.
Right. They couldn't even do that. So yeah.
Scratch a run across here, scratch a run across there. But I mean, that's, the last time that we were, doing that, they actually started out the season 7 games below 500, and I think they were like 5-12. Then they kind of did go 500 for a while, right? Because they ended up going like 12-19 or something before the 13-game win streak, and then coming out of the 13-game win streak,
they were 13. They started 7-15. They were 13-20. I have that in back of my head.
Perfect. Great.
I've written it a bunch.
Right, that's perfect.
But yes, you're right overall. Yeah.
Right, so they had like a little 500 stretch there, and then basically around that road trip, that 10-game road trip, they were 5-5 on that road trip, and just before then they split with Cleveland, and they won 2 out of 3 versus Kansas City. They're about 500 for that stretch then as well, and then the wheels just fell off when they came back from that road trip. Right, that's when we went 3-12 or something like that, and just including a ton of blowouts. But what we have seen is this team can be really, really bad and then suddenly be really, really good. So when you get an encouraging finish to a Mariners series, which the Mariners, by the way, are the last wild card team right now. They're the team that is in the postseason. By winning those last 2 games, you gained 2.5 games or 2 games on the wild card, that last wild card spot. The Twins are 2.5 games out. I mean, if they lose those 2, they're down 6.5. So.
Right. The problem, though, and this is why I kind of mentioned earlier that teams have moved ahead of them, is that if you do really, really well against the Mariners, you knock them out of the wild card spot, and then you still are basically the same number of games from
There is a pack of like 6 or 7 teams in the American League that are all within about 4 or 5 games of each other. And what this losing streak did is it took them from the top of that pack to the bottom of that pack. And that's a harder climb than it looks like, because there's just so many teams in that pack. You've got to
think of it like a NASCAR or an F1 race or whatever. And it's like you don't want to have to pass like 8 people. Like it can be done with 81 games left. There's a lot of laps left in this race.
Right.
But you don't want to get in a position where it's like, well, I'm only 4 games out, but you have 5 teams ahead of you.
Right.
That's a lot more complicated, or a lot more, I guess, overall just difficult than the number of games back.
Because even if you get hot, one or two of those other teams are also going to be hot. Right. And
but
so
I mean, the Twins are in a position now. They just gotta, and I agree with all you were just saying there. But one of the things we talked about coming out of the 13-game winning streak was, look, if they want to go on another stretch where they don't lose for 2 weeks, that's great. But bigger picture, or trying to be more realistic about this team, what we wanted to see, even I think May 18th is when the winning streak ended. We probably did a show that day or the next day, whatever it was. If you go back and listen to that, what we talked about was, okay, now we just want to see them play competent, average or above average baseball. And if they want to go on some big streak, that's great. But what we wanted to have proven to us, going back to the middle of last year, like you said, was, can this team go 15-13 in a month? And we really haven't seen that for a year and a half now. That's fair. We've seen some great streaks, two of the longest 3 or 4 streaks in the history of the Minnesota Twins the last 2 years. And then surrounding that, we've basically seen, and there's been a couple other stretches that were good, last year particularly. But for the most part, they've spent so much of that time as a bad team. And it just makes it so much more difficult than evaluating, what the slightly below 500 record here. And also, this is going to be our last free show for June, which means next time we talk to you, you fine folks who don't, those of you who don't join the Patreon, will be trade deadline month.
Yeah.
And, I had a chance with a group of like 4 or 5 other people to talk to Derek Falvey on, what day was it? Wednesday? I don't know. I'll look it up during this homestand. And he was asked about their approach, heading a month and change out from the trade deadline. And we can get into some of that, but they got to figure that out, because I'm certain that they probably have different opinions than we do. And then many of the people who are listening to this do about the state of the team. I'm going to guess they're perhaps slightly more optimistic, although maybe not. But at some point here, if 2 weeks from now we're having a similar conversation and we're just like, this team just can't play sustained average baseball, basically, like this team is almost counting on these big, long winning streaks to kind of like get their heads above water again, so that they can like gradually sink back down. I just don't know how you can view that sort of group or that sort of club as something that you want to push chips into the middle to, let's say 3-4 weeks from now. But the other thing is,
if 2 weeks from now that's because they've got a 12-game win streak going on, then
absolutely. Right. But I can't sit, especially after what we've watched over the last month. I'm not going to sit here and ever predict that. And that's the crazy thing about this year's 13-game winning streak and last year's 12-game winning streak, which were very similar in terms of timing and circumstances, like you just pointed out. Both times, I remember, and I intentionally asked Rocco Baldelli basically the same question the second time. I said, like, be honest with me. Did you see this coming? And he said, oh, God, no.
No.
And you don't need to see it coming. I'm not saying it like takes away from it. All I'm saying is to be 39-42, or, you go, let's say, to Detroit and you lose a few games and all that, to just be like, we'll be okay. We'll go on another 10-game winning streak at some point. You might not go on another 10 winning streak for 30 years. Like, there's been 5 of them in the history of the Twins. The fact that they happened 2 years in a row with basically the same team does make you kind of ponder that a little bit. But yeah, it's just a very, as we do this show at the exact midpoint of the season, it's just such a weird team. And believe me, John and I have been doing this for a lot. We've covered some weird teams. Trust me.
Yeah, we started this podcast in 2011. So yeah, we've covered a lot of weird baseball.
Yes. But this is the weirdest of the weird. And
I'm betting the team feels the same way. Like, I'm sure Rocco's got to feel the same way.
Yes. I mean, there were even some quotes, post game after these last couple of games against the Mariners where, I mean, first of all, earlier in the homestand when they were losing, I guess after the first or the second Mariners loss, like Correa and Jeffers said it was embarrassing how they're playing. And I mean, they've been pretty harsh as far as that goes at least publicly to the media. I mean, you're not going to rip specific guys or anything, but they get it. They're not blind to this. They realize the roller coaster probably better than anybody that they've been on. And I just, to me, if you want to go on a winning streak again, great. But until I see them put together some type of sustained, and I mean, 3 weeks, let's say, sustained averageness even. Yeah. And, obviously I'd like to see sustained above averages, but a sustained where, they're winning every other game or they're winning 6 out of 10 consistently. And until I see that, I just think it's very difficult not to have more questions than answers with this team. And that gets to be tricky because here's the thing. We can talk, and we'll talk a lot more in the weeks to come about the trade deadline approach and what they should do, what they could do, how ownership's mess falls into that and everything. But you're going to have to make a decision one way or the other here in about 4 weeks. And that's really, when I say I want to see him go on a sustained average, well, it has to be in the next 4 weeks, right? Or it's sort of meaningless in terms of the effect, at least on the trade deadline.
And this road trip is a good opportunity because they start out with Detroit, who leads the division, and then they get to go to Miami to face the Marlins, which is an opportunity to rack up a couple wins, maybe at least potentially get back to 500 if you have a really good road trip here. So I don't know, we'll see.
A couple other things. So back-to-back shutout wins. I certainly did not expect that, given how badly they've pitched over the last month. That probably there's still a few games left in the month.
Yesterday wasn't a shutout, though, right?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, sorry.
So I was all prepared to write about a shutout, and then they
Cole Sands. Yeah,
that was one of the most infuriating half innings of baseball I've ever seen. People were just wanting to close their laptop and go downstairs and interview people. And there was just foul ball after foul ball and bleeder after bleeder. And they gave up runs. But I guess my bigger point was that may end up keeping them. We'll see what happens over the next few games here at the end of the month. But that may end up keeping them from the worst month in terms of ERA in Twins history.
Wow.
And that's saying something because, boy, can I tell you, when I was a kid, especially in the mid-90s, I watched some real horse-ass pitching staffs. And so to have it's going to be bottom 10 or bottom 5 now instead of probably the worst, most likely.
As I recall, we spent a little time on the Patreon reminiscing about some of those late 90s pitching staffs, and both of us had me having season tickets and you having way too much time on your hands to attend games in the Metrodome to watch Rich Robertson pitch.
Oh, it sends a shudder down my spine. Ooh, now people can see it on the video. Ooh, I'm shaking. Yeah, a PTSD from Rich Robertson, Frankie Rodriguez, and no offense to LaTroy, but LaTroy is a closer, and various other guys. So I guess the only other takeaway, and we got some newsy stuff that we can get to here, but I also just wanted to note, we're not probably going to talk that much about Byron Buxton on today's show, not because he doesn't deserve it, but because on each of the last 2 shows, we've devoted a massive chunk of the show, rightfully, to Byron Buxton. And I guess it's a really good sign that I'm having to say too much talk about how great and how healthy Byron Buxton is.
That's so
I just wanted to quickly, before we get into bigger topics, note that he had another good homestand, another multi-homer game, continues to play every day, continues to get some big hits, including RBI yesterday. So yes, we're choosing not to devote 30 minutes of the show to Byron Buxton, not because it wouldn't be warranted and interesting and fun to talk about, but because we literally did that on last Friday's show and then on Monday's Patreon show. So,
and we just mentioned that if you are listening to this via audio and you go check out our Gleaming of the Geek video channel, you will also find clips of Byron Buxton talk, where some of the highlights that when we get excited, and we might just jump on at some point randomly and record something on that if he has another big game, because it's just so much fun to watch.
Before we get into some of the news, let's talk about our first sponsor, which is our presenting sponsor, which is Blackstack.
Blackstack Brewing. I just saw one of their beers, the Pull Tabs Pale Ale, seems to be getting some love around downtown St. Paul. I saw it on tap at a couple different places over the last 2 weeks. And that's because they're known for their beer. That is what Blackstack plants their flag. That's where they plant their flag. They've got lots of different good kinds of beer, and that's great. It used to be great if you went to their tap room, and it still is great if you go to their tap room. You can get all kinds of things that they're experimenting with. But it was harder to find outstate. It was harder to find in stores. It was harder to find in your local liquor store as opposed to sort of a specialty one. No longer. Now you can find Black Stag beer all over the state of Minnesota, from Grand Marais to Rochester, Winona to Fargo. They've got a new distributor. And so you can find more than just that Pull Tabs Pale Ale. You can find the local 755 New England IPA. That's the one I would recommend. I think it's fantastic. I think they really do a nice job with their IPAs. I think that's their specialty. But, if you're like more of a summer beer, Slopes French Pilsner is fantastic. The strawberry rhubarb, we also already mentioned the Pull Tabs Pale Ale. And like I said, if you stop by their tap room, you can also check out the 190-inch big screen where they're going to play Twins games for you, or all kinds of other, tap room trivia, the basic brewery things they have. So stop by Black Stack Brewing near 94 and 280, or even easier, just go to your local liquor store, ask for them at your local liquor store, and keep an eye out for that local 755 New England IPA.
Okay, so let's get into some of the actual news, or at least reported news. So I guess I'll start with the Rocco Baldelli / Falvey stuff. And like I said, we met with Derek Falvey, and as a small group, the beat writers, on, let me see what day this was. This was Monday, before Monday's game. And it was basically, there wasn't any like huge thing that he wanted to kind of talk about, but it was just kind of a state of the team. He wanted to make it clear, I'm not running from this losing that had been going on at that point, and I want to answer tough questions and all that. And so we asked him a little bit of everything, got some injury updates we'll get to, including a substantial one about Royce Lewis. We'll talk about that in a moment. But he was asked about Rocco Baldelli, obviously, and he gave a pretty standard, I thought, vote of confidence. And I came out of that pretty certain that Rocco Baldelli's job was in no jeopardy or no imminent danger. But then a little twist to the story is my colleague at The Athletic, Disco Danny Hayes, former and future, maybe future, we'll see. I don't know. I have confidence that he'll be a guest again on the show.
That's right.
But he reported shortly after that, I think that night, that in fact Rocco Baldelli's 2026 team option on his contract has already been picked up for next season.
Right.
And so not only did Derek Falvey give him a vote of confidence, but he's not at this point even a lame duck manager, which is the name people give when you're on an expiring contract. And what's interesting, I thought, about that situation, obviously Dan reported that, and the reaction on Twitter was
measured.
Heated. Yeah. Dan said to me, I was sitting next to him as he posted the link on Twitter, I think that night, and he said, I'm gonna do the setting on Twitter where only people who are mentioned can reply. He didn't mention anybody, which means no one can reply. Like I couldn't even reply. Right. Just because, he knew what his mentions were going to look like. Everybody just is furious about everything, particularly the manager of a losing baseball team. What he didn't,
especially a losing baseball team that had lost 4 in a row being blown out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
And the timing of that from, I guess, the Twins' perspective was just about as bad as it could be, in that you've now been a month-long funk and news comes out that you picked up the option on your manager. But what I will note is they didn't just pick up that option. It was the timing in terms of when it was reported by Dan,
right,
who did excellent work getting multiple sources to confirm that. That's his job. He did really well. That's just the timing that Dan found out, was able to confirm it with multiple sources, right, which is a big part of journalism, and then wrote about it. That doesn't mean they just picked up the option during this horrid stretch. And in fact, right, there's some indications that this was picked up during a pretty good stretch, perhaps early in the season, or it hasn't been super recently that they picked up the option. Now, the argument I will make here, and have made to Twins official or two over the last few days, was I'm not sitting here and saying it's not horrible timing. It's really bad to your fan base, who's as frustrated as
Sure.
they've been in quite a while, and to learn that the manager's option was picked up for next season. But it's the Twins' own fault. Why not just announce whenever this took place, whether it took place in March, in April, in May, whenever it happened? Why not just as simple as sending out a press release, which, by the way, They do when they claim a guy off waivers.
Right.
They send out a press release. When you sign, Ty France to a non-guaranteed $1 million contract right before spring training, they sent out a press release with, details about that and the money explained and the contract terms explained. It's pretty standard operating procedure for any deal of any sort of significance to a major league team. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, why do they not do that for, let's say, managers or coaches or general managers or president of baseball operations? Because they're not forced to do that. Because the union and the MLBPA and the collective bargaining agreement force all contractual details to be known. And that's not that the Twins will announce it, but it's widely available information.
Right.
Because players want that information out there. Teams have to abide by it, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's no such union and there's no such collectively bargained situation for managers or general managers or whatever it is. And so going back to the Gardenhire days, people were kept in the dark in terms of what was the contract. They would occasionally say, oh, by the way, we extended Gardy's contract by 2 years. They would never tell you how much it was. They would never tell you the options.
I feel like the previous regime was more forthcoming in that sort of information or announced
they were
a lot more than this one. And in fact, I think
neither were forthcoming to the extent that they would be for any player-related transaction.
Right. And I think even right until I want to say 2020, 2021, 2022, something like that, we would get announcements when, Falvey would be extended several years or Baldelli would be extended several years. Those would be news items. Then what we heard, because I remember last year about the second half of the year, we were trying to figure out what Falvey's contract situation was. And the answer was, we made a decision a few years ago that we're not going to announce any kind of contract extensions or any changes in those things during the season. And then apparently Falvey's contract was in fact changed we know he got a new role. Do you have any idea what Falvey's contract is? I don't remember an announcement in the offseason.
They didn't announce anything during the offseason. They don't announce this stuff. And in fact, here's how deep it gets. Dan, nobody is, as far as I know, they shouldn't, doubting the accuracy of Dan's report. It's accurate. Right. Trust me. We joke around about Dan, but Dan can report the F out of stuff. And he's not doing it because he heard a rumor. It's accurate. And they refused not only to confirm that for Dan, on the record, but are giving the same boilerplate statement of we don't comment on this, blah, 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 which, okay, fine. My point there is that's their right to do that. They can choose, similar to the injury situation, they can choose to be forthcoming about stuff, go above and beyond, or they can keep everything close to the vest. I have my opinions on both of those things about whether they're doing themselves a disservice. I think so, but that's their right.
Sure.
However, if you are going to choose to pick up the option on your manager for next season, and you are literally not going to tell anyone, to the point that even when months later, let's say, or however long later, someone reports it, you're not even willing to say it's true at that point publicly. Then guess what? You're at the mercy of whenever that information comes out. It's the exact same thing as the injury thing. If someone gets injured and you refuse to give any sort of timeline or consistent updates, then fans and media members will just try to fill in the blanks as best they can. And you can't really get angry at that. And this whole thing, the bad timing and the uproar and all this stuff, could have been solved by the day they picked up his option. Send out a 2-paragraph press release that just says the Minnesota Twins announced the exercising of manager Rocco Baldelli's 2026 option. The 2019 manager of the year has the 3rd most wins and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I could have written the press release. AI could have written the press release.
That's right.
They chose not to do that. Okay, fine. You chose not to do that. Guess what? Did they think that information was never going to get out for the next 200 years? He was going to show up to spring training next year and people were going to go, oh, I mean, I guess Rocco's, I guess he's here. The information was going to get out at some point, just like the injury stuff gets out at some point. And by choosing not to be the one to manage and put forth that information in a way that they want, it's open season on that. And so I get why it's like, oh, horrible timing. But I did want to make clear the timing. I mean, this has happened not quite a while ago, not like 3 years ago, but it didn't just happen during this most recent bad stretch. So
when I saw the announcement, my initial reaction was, Well, of course he's extended it. Of course he's got a contract in the 2026 season. They're not going to have him be a lame duck manager, right? Because even in Gardy's situation back, then Gardy would always have at least not just that year. He would have the next year.
Right.
Guaranteed,
it would roll over.
Right. It would,
so when you got to the end
and
of
that was a
1
year-by-year contract, but the year-by-year contract was 1 year into the future. That's when the option was going to be picked up. It was going to be picked up 1 year before it happened. And in fact, when Gardy got fired or resigned or however that worked, the dispute was, yeah, you're under contract for next year. Are you going to pick up the following year contract? And Tehran's answer was, I don't think we are. We're not going to pick up that year. And then, Gardy said, if you don't trust me to be doing, I don't want to be a lame duck manager, then let's just end this. That's how that went. And that's not an unusual way for that to go.
Here's how it's both an uncommon situation for managers or anybody in a management position in sports, and also a sort of negative position. It's called lame duck. That's not a real nice term to put on it.
I wouldn't have been shocked. I don't know exactly what I poked around as well. I don't know when this was actually picked up. I would have presumed this was picked up before spring training.
I don't think that's the case. I don't know that for certain. But
I don't either. Right. But that would often be the timing of it.
Right.
And now it wouldn't shock me too much if they didn't do that, just given the way the team ended last year, that maybe they decided to hold it over a little bit, something like that. Maybe that was part of the pressure that Baldelli was facing, in April, knowing that, he didn't have a contract for, the 2026 season. But that seems to be, most of the time in this industry, that's sort of the bare minimum. Is that you've got because this year under contract and the next year under contract.
There are a few ways that can go negatively for a team to sort of let it play out and leave the manager on an expiring contract.
Right.
One is from a negative standpoint that team could be aware of that. The manager is obviously aware of that, but the coaches could be aware of it. The players could be aware of it, and it could affect team morale. It could affect performance. It could just affect the manager's mindset day to day, and that bleeds into other areas. The flip side to that, though, is if a manager is on an expiring contract and they go win the World Series or something like that,
that's right.
Then they got all the leverage. Contract works both ways, especially in sports, where teams often, you see it more with players, obviously, but you also see it with we just saw the New York Knicks fired Tom Thibodeau off an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, and then apparently went to every other team and said, we'd like to interview your under contract head coach. And because teams like the Wolves with Chris Finch had their coach under contract, they could say to the Knicks, go away.
No.
What are you talking? Or say we would need compensation to allow this to happen. Whereas if, let's say, Chris Finch was on an expiring contract and was now a free agent, then he can do whatever he wants, and all of a sudden he has incredible leverage over the Wolves. So,
didn't we just see this a couple of years ago with the Brewers and Craig Counsell, right?
Yes.
Craig Counsell ended up having a pretty successful year with the Brewers. His contract was up. Everybody thought he was going to re-sign with the Brewers. Instead, the Cubs just came and snatched him away.
Right. So those are the reasons from a team perspective that they don't necessarily want a lame duck coach or manager.
Right.
There's a monetary issue here too, obviously, but I will also note, and this is just my personal speculation on this, I don't know that picking up Rocco Baldelli's 2026 option, well, it certainly makes it more likely than not that he's back next year's manager. I don't think it precludes a change there.
For sure.
Because we're not talking about a $20 million option.
Right.
I don't know what Rocco Baldelli makes, but it's like middle reliever money at best. It's not, he makes more than the minimum, but he doesn't make more than, a good regular in baseball. And I'm not just talking about Rocco. I'm talking about pretty much all managers. Right. And, they're making $1 million, $2 million, something like that. They're not making 8, 10, 15, 20 million. They're not on 5-year, $100 million contracts. And so, we could speculate about how much $1 million or $2 affects the decision making, particularly of a Pohlad-owned team that is trying to get out of owning the team.
Sure.
And so I'm not sitting here and being naive and saying that won't be a factor. But if this thing falls apart, I don't think that necessarily protects Rocco Baldelli. Makes it. I don't think it makes him immune to a potential change there. But it's an interesting situation that, like several other things the Twins have done in recent years, that they've sort of magnified in terms of the PR reaction or the fan base's reaction, or even doofuses like us talking about it, which is, whether it was March or April, I don't know when it was, but whatever day they picked up the option, whatever day by the way, that's a decision they made. It's not like there was they forgot and it automatically, ticked in. Whatever day you make that decision, if you just announce it as a normal decision and, put your whole chest into that announcement, because theoretically you're happy to have done that. You decided to do it.
That's right.
If you just announce that as you would with any other transaction of that level, certainly, then okay, yeah, you're going to get people who think it was a bad move. You're going to get people who think it was a good move, just like any free agent signing or trade. But it's not going to be a situation where a month or two later or 3 months later, whatever it's been, where people are like, wait, what?
Right. At the worst possible time. I mean, we're coming out, like you said, not only in a stretch of bad games, but specifically following probably the worst weekend of baseball the Twins have seen locally for a couple of years.
So I don't know. I give Dan credit, which those words, they're painful coming out of my mouth, but I give Dan credit because this is information that would not be known for who knows how long if he hadn't gotten to the bottom of it. But I also, point at the Twins and say, you created this situation. I mean, at the most basic level, you made the decision to pick up the option, right?
Yeah.
And beyond that, you made the decision to keep it a secret. And then even that causes people to say, like you said a minute ago, like this has become sort of standard operating procedure. And I don't believe it's specific to this decision. But when you keep sort of basic decisions, straightforward decisions like this, the extending of contracts, the picking up of contractual options, that sort of thing, these are not like shocking, maneuvers. Right. When you keep those secret intentionally and go out of your way not to let that information come out to the point that you won't even confirm it when it does come out, it's a natural reaction to people to say, why are they keeping this a secret?
Right.
Like, why are they not?
It would have been very matter of fact. It would have been viewed as a very matter of fact sort of thing to do. Well, of course, they're not going to have him walk into the 2025 season as a lame duck. That doesn't make sense for anybody. So,
right. So here were a couple other things from the Falvey conversation. Like I said, Monday, it was like me. I think it was me, Dan, Betsy, Bobby, Lavelle, Matthew Leach, maybe one other person, but it small group. The idea there is there's more room to ask multiple questions each. There's more room for him to sort of open up a little bit about stuff. There weren't any like shocking things, but I just wanted to run through a few notes that I jotted down from that. So like I said, he gave a vote of confidence to Rocco Baldelli that I thought was pretty standard. He basically said what he said before, which is, I see the work that Rocco Baldelli and his coaching staff do on a day-to-day basis. I am confident that they are putting in the work. I'm confident that they're doing the right things. I still think he's the man for the job, all that sort of stuff. Beyond that, Falvey made it very clear that he and the training staff expect Pablo Lopez not only back, but back for, I would say, a substantial part of the second half of the season, which sort of matches the initial 8 to 12 week kind of estimate on the shoulder injury. That puts you, 8 weeks puts you like into August, 12 weeks puts you like late August, early September. But the way he was talking, and they don't know that much about it because it's only been, what has it been? Less than a month, right? So
yeah, I mean, he wasn't scheduled to throw for the first 4 weeks. So I don't think we haven't even gotten to the point where there's even really a check-in point here to sort of evaluate things, right?
Right. But Falvey essentially said, and I could quote him, but I'll paraphrase it. But he basically said, we're acting under the assumption that Pablo Lopez will be a big part of the stretch run at the very least for this team. So that's good to hear that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of hurdles to clear before that happens. There's a lot of room.
Is that his way of saying we're not buying an ace? We're not trying to buy a starting pitcher at the trade deadline?
Yeah. Well, he was asked about some of the depth and the minor league side, which is something we talked about, I think, on Monday's show or even on maybe last Friday's show about.
Especially because we lost some of that depth.
Yes, but about how the AAA guys that they thought they were going to be counting on as kind of next in line have either underperformed in the case of Julian and Miranda, although Julian is playing much better lately, but since being demoted, or they've been injured in the case of Keyshow and Emmanuel Rodriguez and Austin Martin, who just returned last night, I think hit a home run in his first game back with the Saints after missing time. Okay, even better. And, now Mickey Gasper's injured and they don't trust McCusker and all that. I thought, so he was sort of asked in a roundabout way about that, and he basically said, quote, quite frankly, and then the rest of it was, I'll paraphrase, but some of the AAA guys they were counting on his depth are just not performing up to a level that would be, knocking on the door to the majors, like forcing the issue. And some of that's injuries, but this is something we've been talking about for weeks now. And I think that's definitely true. And I think there's maybe some bad luck involved in that, but also like if, let's say Jose Miranda is not performing,
right,
that's Jose Miranda's fault, but it's also, the team's fault or the coaching's fault. Like they haven't put these guys in a position to like bounce back and kind of make the case that I have to call this guy back up. Now, like I said, Julian is at least trending in the right direction over the last, 2 or 3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, he's got over 1,000 OPS here in June. So
right.
Yeah.
Let's see a couple other quick things from Falvey just to pass along. Speaking about the deadline stuff, he's asked right around this time every year the same type of question, which is like, are you guys going to have any money to spend at the deadline? Or will you guys, even aside from the will you be buyers, but it's kind of like if you are buyers, can you actually buy?
Right.
Are you going with coupons into the scratch and dent aisle?
That's right, yeah, right.
And my sense, and again, this is me trying to provide context through the filter of my experiences. My sense is in past years, including last year, when that was a major question, and it turned out they didn't do anything at the past 2 deadlines and didn't spend any money. But even last year, when he was sort of asked about that a month out or 3 weeks out, my sense of the answers he would generally give was, well, the Poleheads are always supportive when we present them with an idea that sounds good, and they're always willing to, invest if it helps the team, and it's our job to kind of make the case for specific moves that will help the team. What I took away from what he said when answering that question on Monday was that he basically said, we'll get a chance to make that pitch to the Poleheads, which is a subtle difference to me, but I think a meaningful difference.
I read the quote too, and the quote was when something like, I wish we had it up here, but the quote was something like, we will bring, we feel like we can bring things like that to the Poleheads, and then what happens then is what happens then. Something like that. Like it was a less optimistic version of, we expect them to be supportive of that sort of thing. It was more of a, we'll make the case. And
it used to be, we'll make the case, and they are almost always supportive of that. And now it is, well, we'll get a chance to make the case. And, maybe that's just semantic and wording, and I'm reading too much into that, but it certainly would match from a narrative standpoint where we feel this thing's gone over the last, 2 or 3 years or something like that. And then the last thing, I asked him, because we had this conversation recently about sort of the core of this team and whether at some point in year 2 of being a mediocre or, sub-mediocre team, is if we're kind of fooling ourselves thinking that this core is a winning core. Like it's always, if they get healthy, if they do this, they can win. Well, there's mounting evidence that maybe the core just isn't as strong as you thought. So I asked him very specifically about the core and whether he's considered the idea of, a month from now, we just need to change the core. This core just isn't as good, or isn't as, it doesn't fit as seamlessly, or whatever the reasoning is for it, that they've underperformed. And he basically, one of his quotes directly was, I believe in the core of this team. And I thought was pretty clear, basically saying, he kind of pushed back on it a little bit, which is like, well, who are you talking about? Buxton's having a great this, and Joe Ryan's having a great first half, and we'll get Ober back on track, and Pablo was great before the injury, and we're going to get Royce back on track and Carlos back on track. But that kind of was my point. If you just find yourself saying, well, we're going to get this guy back on track, and this guy back on track, and this guy healthy, and this guy healthy, and you've named 6 of the 8 core guys.
Sure.
And really all you can fall back on is Buxton and Joe Ryan have been really good, which is undeniable. They've both been great. They both should be all-stars. That was kind of my point. Like that is the core. I don't want to say the core's rotten. I'm not trying to make like too much of it or anything, but I do think it would be fair to reassess the core, but he sort of, I think, downplayed that. And he also, then the last thing on that, he said, and he sort of said this in the past, but it seemed a little stronger on this front, that they will be open to major league for major leaguer trades. But as we've learned,
I mean, that's
a tough needle to thread, because you need, we used to always talk about this with like Max Kepler, let's say, like, can they as Larnick and Wallner that were coming up through the minors, it was like, well, it's mid-season. Kepler's kind of underperforming, but still decent. Could they trade him for some pitching help and then just put Wallner in right field or put Larnick? But the problem there is, one, you need a team that wants your major leaguer for sure. And it's not like the Twins have that many major leaguers who are performing great, as evidenced by the conversation we just had. But then two, you need like another contending team that needs an outfielder but has an extra pitcher, or needs a starting pitcher and has an extra infielder. And that's just a very small pool. It's just a very shallow water to be trying to figure something out.
I mean, for the most part of the trade deadline, you don't see those kinds of trades.
Yes, it's a prospect for veteran.
You mostly see a prospect for a veteran trade. And I think actually that's probably a bigger question to be asking. Because although we have seen them do that, 2022 they did that, right? They threw prospects out to trade for some veteran help, closer and a starting pitcher. And I mean, they went all in on that trade deadline.
Yeah. Didn't go so well.
But didn't go all so well. But we've also seen them, not do much over the last couple of years. And whether there's, some question as to whether or not that was because they just couldn't afford to pick up the salary of the veteran,
right,
which is ridiculous, right? Or whether or not they just valued their prospects enough that they weren't willing to give up their prospects. So they thought, we're more interested in building for 2025, 2026, 2027 by hanging on to some of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably both things.
A little bit. Yeah.
There was a monetary, in terms of capital spent on trade acquisitions, it was both monetary and prospect, I think, were the combination.
Because you have to pay one or the other.
Right.
Either you have to pick up a bad contract and then you don't have to give up as much, or you have to pick up, a good player and then you have to give up a fair amount. So,
before we talk about Royce Lewis and some other injury updates, let's get to our next batch of sponsors. So you may notice that your boys here are wearing some new shirts.
That's right.
And I can tell you, when I am in my house, I basically exclusively wear dark blue and black T-shirts. That's all I wear. John knows. And in fact, we recorded every time I go to John's house to record an episode for the last 10 years, I've worn basically the same blue T-shirt, of which I have like 15 pairs. Like I'm like Inspector Gadget. I wear the same thing every day. Becky said on the first episode after she watched us, she said, you can't just wear the same blue T-shirt if you're going to be on YouTube.
So what do I do for you?
You bring me some new, fancier, nicer, higher quality blue and black T-shirts, which I very much appreciate. I got this one on now. It fits great. It feels great. You can tell the quality of it. And these are from True Classic, which is a new sponsor of ours. So we thought, we had to upgrade our look now that we're doing video podcasting, basically.
They just do the basics very, very well. If you go to trueclassic.com/Gleeman, you're going to be able to find basically anything you've been wanting to try. I will tell you, I tried something that I never thought I would try. I got stretchy jeans here at Gleeman. And I got it. And I wore them yesterday to the Killers concert. That's how confident I felt in them, which is part of their point. Like, yes, they're very good because of their fit and because of their fabric. But their point is that they just want you to have some confidence when you go out. And the way you feel have some confidence is if you've got good clothes that fit you well and then aren't priced so that, you got to step out of your budget to go get them. So what they would do is encourage you to go check out trueclassic.com/Gleeman. You can forget overpriced designer brands, just the disposable fast fashion. They're built for comfort and built to last and built to give back. I'm really happy with my jeans, and I'm really happy with the traveler pants I got, the sweatpants I got, the T-shirts I got. I'm wearing the polo right now. So again, trueclassic.com/Gleeman. Go check them out and see what you think about them.
Our next sponsor is a longer time sponsor, which is Factor.
Yeah.
And Factor meals are great. Here's how it works. You can choose on their website each week whole different slew of menu options, whether you're vegetarian, you want to go meat heavy, you want to go family friendly, whatever you're into.
They have 45 weekly menu options.
Yes, and it's always rotating. They always have new ideas and new menu items. And the idea basically is they ship them right to your door, so you don't have to go shopping. You don't have to cook. They're super easy. You just heat them up. We've both tried them over the years. They're not only incredibly easy to make. You just heat them up.
Right.
They're healthy generally.
Right. Yeah, you get to choose like Calorie Smart or the
Right.
Protein Plus or the Keto. So they're healthy, they're fast, they're easy,
And here's the
they're
biggest
really
key.
tasty.
Yeah, they actually taste good.
Yeah, right.
And
the
so
butter chicken, my goodness, so good.
yeah,
wanna get more of
we've definitely tried them, and you can get started at factormeals.com/Gleeman50off and use the code Gleeman50off, like 50 off. And the reason for that is you get 50% off, and they give you free shipping on top of that for your first box. So that's the code Gleeman50 off, Gleeman50 off at factormeals.com/Gleeman50off for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, that's factormeals.com/Gleeman50 off. Okay. Now that we're certified models, I'm going to become a diva, I think, now that I'm a model.
I think that would be great. Yeah.
Oh, you had so much room to make a joke there that I've already been a diva. And
Yeah. No, not at all.
YouTube has changed you, John. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Royce Lewis. He's been around on this homestand. They announced to us yesterday, which was Thursday, that he's going out on a rehab assignment Friday, which is today now. There's Royce Lewis on our screen.
He is.
He is going to be playing. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like. So let me put it this way. He's scheduled to be playing Friday night tonight for the St. Paul Saints. He's going to, it sounds like, start at DH in the first game, and then they'll kind of evaluate from there, see how his hamstring does with that. It's possible he takes Saturday off. He plays Sunday, something like that. We'll see. They haven't laid it out, at least to us, beyond that. But it's noteworthy to start the rehab assignment today, Friday, because it is exactly 2 weeks to the day since he injured the same left hamstring. And, they deemed it at the time a mild left hamstring strain as opposed to a moderate one that he suffered in mid-March during spring training. And the difference there is a moderate hamstring strain tends to be 6 to 8 weeks. And in fact, I think he returned in roughly like 7.5 weeks from that the first time. And then he played 30 games, the last 9 or 10 of which were actually pretty productive. Like he was showing some signs of at least rounding into form a little bit, which made the, going down with a similar injury very, doubly frustrating. But, he indicated at the time that he felt it was a minor injury. But Royce Lewis, like you could be like in war with Royce Lewis and like see his bodiless head roll past you, and the head would turn to you, would smile, would say, "Hey man, how's it going? How's the family?" And then go, "I'll be ready for war tomorrow." Like that's how Royce Lewis works.
That's right. Yeah.
But even the Twins, who are a lot more realistic about his status, and by the way, he's aware of that. He's even taken to joking lately. Like, I know they don't trust me on this stuff, but I'll tell you what I think anyway. But even the Twins, they didn't give a timeline because they don't give timelines often. But they certainly made it clear that they didn't view this as anywhere near as substantial as the first one. And this week, I spotted him multiple days pregame when the weather abided, running in the outfield. He ran the bases then the last couple of days.
Well, I think we learned Friday after the last video podcast we did, or the last free podcast we did, that he was starting, quote unquote, a running progression this week. And apparently the running progression went well enough that he's at the point now where he can start playing. So
yeah, I saw him running the bases, which is always the last thing, because bases, you're running full speed, but you're also not running in a straight line. You're making cuts, you're making deceleration, acceleration, all that stuff. So that's a big thing. He's been hitting, he's been fielding, and so he checked all the boxes to the point that they were like, let's send him to St. Paul to start rehabbing. And, they haven't said what the timeline on the rehab is. When he came back from the moderate strain, the plan was for him to play like 10 or 12 games, but then weather wiped out half those. He ended up playing, 7 games or something like that before returning. And then we saw him struggle for several weeks before kind of getting back on track a little bit. He hasn't been down as long. He's been down 2 weeks only, and he's been able to hit and do some other things throughout that time. So I guess I would expect this to be a fairly brief rehab assignment, assuming it goes well, and I don't mean from like he needs to hit home run standpoint. I just mean assuming he runs the bases, assuming he ends up playing some third base and he comes out of it each day and comes back the next day feeling pretty good. I would expect this to be, certainly single digit rehab days. And it's possible he could join the team. I don't think in Detroit this weekend, obviously, but it's possible he could join them at the end of the road trip and certainly at the beginning of the next homestand, which is in, basically a week plus from now.
They've got an off day on Monday. Both the Saints and the Twins have an off day on Monday. Then the Twins are going to Miami. But the key there is that St. Paul's also going on the road on Tuesday. So unless he's going to go to Gwinnett and play some road games, which maybe he is.
What do you got against Gwinnett?
I got
Lovely place.
I've never been to Gwinnett. I can't say a bad thing about Gwinnett. But unless he's going to be playing some road games in Gwinnett, which is just a less controlled environment than playing things in St. Paul, I wouldn't be shocked to see him playing the games in Miami.
Better weather though in Gwinnett, I'll tell you that.
Probably, but better than here, but not better than Miami necessarily, where you're playing indoors.
True. Yeah, I think that would be optimistic to join him in Miami because that would only allow him to play like 2 or 3 rehab games. And like I said, the first game tonight, he's going to be a designated hitter. So we know from past rehab, they want guys to play at least 1 full game, usually back-to-back full games defensively, which would mean going to third base for him. But the bigger picture, we're trying to speculate here. I don't know why, but because it's fun. But I don't know why we're
podcasters, man. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Sure.
But bigger picture, the point is he's ready to rehab. It's only been 2 weeks, which is not a lot of downtime. That suggests it was indeed a mild hamstring injury. He's moving pretty well in terms of what I saw him running the bases during this last couple of days. And bigger picture, maybe he's a week away from returning. Maybe he's 5 days. Who knows what it is? The point is, barring a setback, he's close to returning. And we know enough about Royce Lewis now in terms of injuries, in terms of production, that he's human now. He's been humanized now. It's not every time he comes back, he hits a home run in his first at bat. That's out the window now. We've seen him go through extended stretches where he's hit miserably. We've seen, the week leading up to this latest injury, he was kind of climbing out of that hole a little bit, but he was certainly not, dominant or anything.
Sure.
And so I don't want to sit here and act like we may have a year ago or 2 years ago where it's like, just wait until this lineup gets Royce back and boy, it's going to take off. We know better than that. I mean, I would love to see that. And he's certainly...
I would say we were like that not just a year or 2 years ago. We were like that maybe 6 weeks ago. We were hoping.
No, because he was so bad in the second half of last year that.
Well, that's a good. Actually, that's a good point.
The air had been let out of that balloon already. But
you're right.
And so it's even more so the case with that. And so, but I'm also not going to sit here and tell you that they couldn't use Royce Lewis. Like, even if it's 2/3 of the time switching between DH and third base, and even bat off the bench, they just need still competent hitters. And you look at we've been talking a lot about this over the last week on various episodes, like some of the bench guys, the Jonah Brides and the Deshaun Kerseys of the world. These guys, their role is so intentionally limited, and their production, even within those roles, has been so abysmal that Royce Lewis doesn't have to be big, bright, capitalized Royce Lewis. He can just be human Royce Lewis, solid major league hitter, and that will be a big plus to this lineup. So I'm excited for him, given all he's gone through, which we've talked about endlessly, obviously, to maybe only have to miss 3 weeks with this thing and not have it be another 2 months and another huge missed chunk of the season. And, a situation where he's got to build all the way back up and go through a dozen rehab games. Like, we'll see. I mean, he's still got to get through this. There's still hurdles to clear, like I said, but it is nice for once to be like, well, we hope this is a pretty minor injury. And it turns out, actually 2 weeks later, it does look like a pretty minor injury, because that has not always been the case with the Twins in general, but specifically with Royce Lewis. A couple other quick injury updates. Luke Keeschel, I watched him do pregame with a Ramon Borrego, who's like their infield instructor. He did the thing where he has Keeschel go on one knee, and then he kind of hits him hard choppers from a pretty short distance over and over. Okay. And he has him kind of feel that's, get your reaction time and all that. He's got the cast off. He's doing one-handed swings. I think he may have even progressed to just swinging off a tee. However, not close quite yet, I would say, to going on a rehab assignment. And also his rehab assignment, Luke Keeschel, whenever it does begin, is going to be a lot longer for 2 reasons. Sure. One, he's already been out 2 months, and probably by the time he comes back, it'll be closer to 3 months, whereas Lewis has been out for 2 weeks. But then beyond that, we got to be realistic with Luke Keeschel. He was amazing for 7 games.
Right.
And I'm not taking anything away from how great he looked. And it's not like he came out of nowhere. He was a top 100 prospect who was certainly rising. I mean, he won minor league player of the year for the Twins last year. I mean, he's a guy, it was justified in being very excited about him arriving in late April. And then he just had one of the best first weeks in the majors that you will ever see in terms of hitting and running and just excitement and clutch situations. And I'm not taking away from that, but it was 7 games. And so again, kind of like I just said with Lewis, like whenever he does come back, I hope that the thought isn't, well, Luke, this 22-year-old with 7 games in the majors will save everything, as opposed to just add another competent piece to this lineup, and maybe you can start to, kind of build towards an above-average offense. But
I will be interested to see how long that rehab assignment goes for.
Yeah, well, and just to be clear, he's not close to beginning a rehab assignment.
Right,
yet.
understood.
So,
yes, right, that's right. Yeah. We're a ways from that to begin with, and then on top of that, like you said, he's got to get back up to speed. He's also just somebody who is brand new to major leagues. Like, I mean, he hadn't been in AAA for more than a couple months.
Yeah,
and he was still learning that. Right.
Not even. I don't even think it was a couple months. It was
right.
a few weeks, and he actually hadn't been that great at AAA when they called him up.
Right.
They just needed somebody, and they thought, "What the hell? We like him. Let's call him up." And they were right. He was ready to make an immediate impact. But this is a broken forearm, and so. There's some,
and that's coming off of Tommy John surgery.
Yes,
or not?
Which he's
Tommy John? Yeah, it was Tommy John. Yeah,
which he's still partially recovering, which is why he was a DH for a lot of his time with the Twins, as opposed to playing second base. But the bigger picture with him is the recovery is going well. He's healing well. I think he's scheduled to undergo another like X-ray or imaging to determine like if it's fully healed or partially healed, whatever. But all accounts, things are going well and on track for Luke Keisho, but he's still a ways away here. A few other we mentioned Austin Martin, who came back from the IL hamstring, hit a homer on his first pitch at AAA St. Paul last night. We know it's not like Austin Martin really blew the doors off anybody last year, but he could at least be a bench player, a right-handed, utility man.
An option, right?
They could use that.
And he's young enough that maybe there's some upside still there that is yet to be untapped. I know that we don't have necessarily as much hope for that as we had 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but
I also think he has some of the same skills that Kersey has. In terms of pinch running, being able to play corner outfield. He's not as good an outfielder as Kersey, but I think he's maybe not quite as fast, but I would put them probably neck and neck in terms of just base stealing ability, because Austin Martin is a good base stealer, and you would hope he has a little bit more punch offensively, although we've yet to really see that. But so he's back into the mix. If he can put together a good stretch at AAA, maybe. Emmanuel Rodriguez, who's been out with a hip injury, is still rehabbing in rookie ball, and I think went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts yesterday. So he might be a little ways away from rejoining the Saints, but he's, by all accounts, seems healthy. Let's see, a couple other things. Another blow to the starting pitching depth, Andrew Morris, who, with Lopez and Zebby Matthews out, had become kind of the next in line at AAA almost by default. He's now on the Saints IL with a forearm strain, so he's out indefinitely. So now if they were to need a starter here before Zebby Matthews comes back, and Zebby Matthews has been playing catch, but is not, his return is not imminent either. If they were to need another starter, I don't even really know who it would be. I mean, it
might be a veteran.
It might be Travis Adams, and you try to get him through 3 or 4 innings. Could be a Dobnik situation. It could be a Darren McGawkin situation. Like, I don't know. There isn't. I mean, Marco Raya has pitched better over the last few weeks, but his overall performance at AAA is pretty bad. Corey Lewis has been pretty bad at AAA.
Yep.
The starting pitching depth has been used, and any more depth needed creates some real question marks here.
We saw Travis Adams be called up to the Twins a couple weeks back. He was on the team for 3, 4, 5 days, something like that. Never actually made it into a game. He's one of the guys that they've been playing with in AAA and AA, where they've been having him basically throw 60 to 70 pitches every 4 days. It's an experiment they're doing with a handful of guys at AA or AAA, and he's been doing that. I got to see him pitch last Wednesday in St. Paul. That was a game where he wasn't scheduled to necessarily be the starter that day. He was just going to be coming in like he does most of the time, as sort of the middle inning or late inning guy who's going to go 3 to 4 innings, throw 60 to 70 pitches, and then be available and frankly pitch one way or the other 4 days later, either as a starter or as a reliever. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see. They're definitely doing this with a number of guys in the minor leagues, and it makes some sense in the minor leagues because, you're not trying quite as hard to necessarily win those games.
Right.
I don't know how that plays in the majors. I presume it just doesn't, but I wouldn't be shocked if they, go to him as we need an emergency starter for a couple of weeks. We will put you in there as a starter, or we will bring you in as sort of a, swingman role. And we're going to no longer pay attention to you pitching every 4 days. We're just going to have you, now that you're basically built up to a 70 to 80 pitch person, we're going to use you wherever we can get to use you.
Yeah. And I mean, his history is just being a normal starter, and he's been pretty durable even last year through, 100 something innings as a starter. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's not ideal. You would like to call up somebody if needed who can go 6 innings, but realistically, most of the rookies and young guys they've called up, even Festa, even Matthews, Simeon, Woods Richardson, guys who have some experience in the majors now, it's like we said, a coin flip whether you can get him through 5 innings anyway. So what's the real difference trying to get Travis Adams through 3 or 4 innings and go into the bullpen versus trying to get Simeon Woods Richardson or David Festa through 4 or 5 innings and go into the bullpen? Like, you do whatever you can in that.
You're trying to get him through the lineup twice is basically what you're trying to do. Yeah. And see where it ends.
And then the last injury update, Jair Camargo, who has been the third catcher stuck at AAA, but on the 40-man roster is the third catcher, but Jeffers and Vasquez never have gotten hurt, so they haven't needed him. He was performing pretty badly at AAA and now just had Tommy John surgery. And so he's out, which is not a great surgery for a catcher because you do need to throw. And his strength, I would say, above all, maybe raw power offensively, but probably his biggest strength over the years is just arm strength, like throwing. So he's out of the picture. It wouldn't surprise me, I guess, if that's it for Jair Camargo with the Twins. I mean, he 2 years ago had performed well enough at AAA that made you think this guy could be a backup catcher, and they just never needed a backup catcher. And over the last 2 years, his production offensively at AAA has fallen off quite a bit, and they still haven't needed a third catcher. So he's just sort of been in St. Paul. And so I think, combined with this injury, my guess is that if they have a third catcher on the 40-man roster next year, it will probably be someone else, because his recovery from this would probably take him into next season anyway.
And you might remember that the Twins actually had a fourth catcher, maybe even a fifth catcher, if you want to count Mickey Gasper, on the 40-man roster as they headed into spring training. We were trying to figure out, what they were going to do about that. That was as Diego Cartaya. Is that what I'm remembering the name right?
That's right.
Diego Cartaya actually has already been dropped from the 40-man roster, and he's still playing at AAA, but he's batting like 0.73. So
yes, and John is not being hyperbolic. He's batting something. Like it starts with a 0, his batting average. Before we get to our last, we talk a little pitching because I feel like we've been pretty hitter heavy.
Yeah,
let's talk about our last couple of sponsors.
All right, IDEOU is a brand new sponsor that we've got, and I think if you're somebody who is focusing on sort of your professional career and how you are going to be designing a business, maybe your entrepreneur role, maybe you have some business skills you want to work on. IDEOU is a organization that specializes in training for that sort of thing. So I'm about to start a course with them starting June 30th. They've got all kinds of different courses that you can do, and I'm going to be doing one on AI and how AI can be used in design processes. They've got all kinds of different options. Some of them are simply, go at your own pace type courses. Some of them are you sit in on live things. Some of them are workshops. And it's not just AI stuff. This is basically any sort of business skills and design skills that you want to explore and gear up and level up your stuff. So you get practical, repeatable frameworks from them and help you and your team innovate and with confidence and stay ready for what's next. Has a whole suite of stuff, especially right now they're kind of pushing their AI design thinking programs to show you how to combine AI tools with human-centered design to boost creativity, speed up insights, and solve problems in new ways. So Class starts soon. Like I said, I think mine starts Sunday morning. So enroll today for a limited time. IDEOU is offering our listeners 15% off site wide. You just go to IDEOU.com/Gleeman. That's IDEOU.com/Gleeman for 15% off. IDEOU.com/Gleeman.
Our last sponsor today is a good one because now you guys can see our hair. I also, by the way, had someone come up to us or an usher say to me, "Nice hair," because we say that.
Which means they're a Patreon subscriber.
Someone said to me, the way you talk about your hair on the show before we saw you on video, I pictured even less hair. I was like, okay, but this is semantics, right? I mean, and so our sponsor today is Hims. And here's the way Hims works. They have a lot of products, but one of them that we're talking about today is stuff you can get to help grow and regrow your hair. Right. And if you're, feeling self-conscious about it, if let's say you just started doing video podcasts and now you have to look at yourself on screen and you say to yourself, boy, I'd like a little bit more hair or a lot more hair. You can get help with that on Hims, and they have a lot of different options even within that. Like there's topical stuff, there's pills that you can take, there's all sorts of different stuff.
That's right. And you don't have to listen. It's not your job to know all of the stuff that's available, but that's why you check out Hims. It's easy to just arrange an interview with them, learn more about it, find out all the different treatments that they can do for you and your hair, and all you have to do is answer a few questions, and a medical provider will determine if a treatment is right for you and what that treatment is, and if prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to you for free, and no insurance is needed. One low price covers everything. So
yeah, you can start your free online visit today at hims.com/Gleeman. That's HIMS.com/Gleeman for your personalized hair loss treatment options. That's hims.com/Gleeman. And now I'm going to read this. Results vary. Thank you. Results vary.
I was wondering who was going to get this.
Yeah. Well, mainly you're going to have to shut up now, John. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information.
You have been practicing that. That was so smooth.
What's that, reading? Yeah, I'm great at it. That's all I do.
Finasteride, I think.
Sure. Okay, so let's see. A few other little spare news and notes here. We talked a little bit about pitching too, but I guess we mentioned Eddie Julian heating up a little bit, which is good to see. We mentioned Gasper is hurt, so even if the Twins wanted to call him up, which was pretty clear they didn't, but he had been crushing AAA for the second straight year, but now he's out of the picture. He has plantar fasciitis, I think, in both heels.
Both feet, yeah. Bilateral. Yeah. That made me think, ugh.
Yeah, I don't say bilateral anymore about anything because that was ruined by the Mauer situation many years ago.
Correct, yes.
I just say both. But that's the same. If people are saying, I recognize that as an injury I've heard about. That's the heel injury that Carlos Correa had each of the last 2 years in different feet. But not great. Although probably less bad in a DH than a shortstop. But
probably
not great either way. And then the draft is about 3 weeks away now. It's during the All-Star break. Last year's first round pick, Kalen Culpepper, I think he was the 21st pick out of Kansas State, had a great first half for high A Cedar Rapids, and
unbelievable.
Just promoted to Double-A Wichita basically 11 months after being drafted at age 22. And he's already, I think, popped a couple homers maybe for Wichita. So
played some good shortstop. He made a killer play last night.
We talked about him on Monday's show.
Monday's show. Yeah,
just getting into more what type of prospect is he, and he's basically now a top 100 prospect less than a year after being drafted. So that's going well. So he's at Double-A along with Walker Jenkins in the same lineup.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about pitching here. So I guess on a couple episodes ago, Bailey Ober was coming off the start in Cincinnati. And our discussion about that was, it was encouraging in the sense that it was reversing the rapidly negative trend of his previous 2 or 3 starts where his velocity was down. He walks 6 guys in the start before it, which is just completely uncharacteristic for a guy who pounds the strike zone. but we were also kind of stuck on, he gave up 4 or 5 runs. He gave up 9 hits or something like that. Like the velocity was up, but it was still 90-91 instead of 92-93. Gave up a lot of hits. Cincinnati's an okay lineup, but not an amazing lineup. It was the reversal of a hugely negative or rapidly negative trend, but on its own, it wasn't necessarily a particularly encouraging start.
Right.
Like if we didn't know he had been struggling for several weeks leading up to it, we would have just went, that wasn't his sharpest outing. But it did at least create some level of optimism, I think, even with Bailey Ober and some of the Twins folks coming off that, because the velocity, he had reversed the negative trend. He'd gotten back up a little. He talked after the Cincinnati start about how just physically he felt better. His hip felt better. His mechanics were smoother. So then he goes into this against Seattle. And, the big question was, what are we going to see? And as you can see by the picture John just showed, didn't go that great. The velocity was up a little bit. It was above 90, but it wasn't great. Talking to him afterward, he, kind of admitted like this is another step in the wrong direction. Like I honestly start to feel bad for the guy. And I know that sounds silly, but there are plenty of struggling athletes, and I'm not singling him out as,
Sure.
He's a good dude, but like that shouldn't matter that much. But what I mean is he's been so open and honest talking through these struggles, both mechanically, health-wise, the ups and downs of it. And I do appreciate, as someone who writes about the team and talks about the team, someone who doesn't just go, we'll figure it out, but actually talks you through some of the stuff. But the downside to someone who's kind of willing to lay it all out there, even on television, on camera after starts, is, you can see how hard it hits them. You can see how hard, how much it weighs on them. And he's been a guy over the last 3 or 4 years who's been, I would argue, the Twins' most consistently solid starting pitchers, and one of the most consistently solid starting pitchers in the league. And I don't mean an ace, but I just mean a good, solid. You're going to get 5 or 6 competent innings at the absolute worst. He's going to take his turn in the rotation every 5 games. He's going to give you a 3-something ERA. He's going to eat up a bunch of innings, et cetera, et cetera. And that just hasn't been there now for basically the last month. Yeah. And I think the velocity being back up a little bit is a good sign. And it signals to me that he's either feeling better or they figured out some mechanical adjustments that can kind of smooth it out, even while he doesn't feel 100% physically with the hip and everything. But overall, these are just they're not real encouraging outings. But as we just talked about with Andrew Morris, it's one thing to say he's not helping the team right now and he's not helping himself right now. And that's true. What's the alternative? Like, it's very easy if this were a month ago and you had a healthy Pablo Lopez and everybody was pitching well, and you had both Zebby Matthews and Festa at AAA, or Festa and Simeon Woods Richardson at AAA, then maybe you go, look, this isn't clicking. You're not doing yourself any favors. Let's shut him down for 2 or 3 weeks. Let's let this thing calm down, and we'll try to get him back, for the second half. But who would replace him in the rotation? I mean, the rotation is struggling so much as is that, and Ober's not helping that. He's one of the biggest strugglers in the rotation. But I wonder how much that plays a part in how they're treating him. I mean, he's earned a chance to pitch through this, but I would argue he's kind of already now reached the point where, he's 4 or 5 starts where it's been pretty bad now consecutively. But I don't know who the alternative would be.
I mean, it was encouraging in that it was all one bad inning, right?
Yes. Third inning was bad.
The third inning was, he gave up 6 runs,
a
couple of home runs. It's completely snowballed on him. And you can see where, I think a little bit, similar to what we saw yesterday, as the Twins scored 8 runs in an inning. Pitcher is in there and he's throwing his 30th and 40th pitch of the inning. Yeah, things can snowball in a hurry at that point. He regained control after that, went 4 more innings after that. The strikeouts were up. There were no walks. So, there were some encouraging signs within it. We've seen that occasionally, but yeah, it comes back to, he's convinced, or he is trying to figure out a way to manage whatever he is working through on his hip, and it's not going away in a hurry. It doesn't sound like this is, I don't know exactly what the situation is, or we revealed the situation, like what would happen if he had a month off. But as you point out, it's a moot question at this point. Now, it might not be a moot question in a few weeks, Zebby Matthews could be back on the rebound here. Pablo Lopez could be back in August. And right now, if Zebby Matthews comes back healthy and looking good and such, and you take a look at the 4 other guys in the rotation, I mean, it's a little bit of a coin flip, and however it is, 3 weeks from now, however it is right now is not how it's going to necessarily be 3 weeks from now. We're not going to necessarily have the same view of all of these guys, but right now, the one that I would pick to take a little time off, try and get. I don't think you have to demote him. I think it's a matter of getting him on the IL and letting him work through this problem. Is Ober. Like, he would be the odd man out if Zebby Matthews was back today, which he is not. I just want to emphasize that we don't, like you said, he's doing some throwing. That's it. So
I mean, I think along those lines, the real question there is, you got 4 weeks to the trade deadline. If Bailey Ober is still in this type of rut or situation, does that mean the Twins should be trying to at least add some competent 4th starter or something like that?
I mean, a lot of that depends on where you think Zebby and where you think Pablo are going to be.
Yeah.
Right?
Although the reality, sadly, is Pablo ain't going to be back by the trade deadline. There's 0% chance of that.
Right. No, obviously. Right.
But the reality is, if Bailey Ober doesn't start pitching better, and you're not going to have Pablo Lopez back before the trade deadline, and who knows, Zebby might be able to make a few starts before the trade deadline. The reality is, you get those things, it's more likely that the Twins lose some games between now and then, and maybe it's a moot point that way.
Well, that's a good point.
Unfortunately, I will add on the Bailey Ober front, which is interesting because this has been a topic with him before. Part of his frustration after this most recent start, and part of the reason why I said he just made me so sad, like looking at him try to make sense of this happening, is the homer he gave up to, I forget who it was, but it was a changeup down out of the zone,
right? And
it just got absolutely clobbered. And he kind of hinted after the game, or maybe even more than hinted, like some of the swings in that 3rd inning, where I was throwing some decent pitches with some decent velocity, and I'm used to getting swings and misses or foul balls on those, and they were just hammering them, makes me wonder if they had something on him, tipping pitches, or they had something on his.
That's been a recurring question with him, by the way. I mean, that was Kansas City was the one that he was always questioning about.
I mean, this ties back to the overall mechanical, smoothness with him, and I think pitch tipping is often based on mechanics. It's often based on, some part of your kind of pitch movement physically is different and stands out. And teams have gotten so good at spotting this stuff. I heard from a non-Twins person who works for an American League team, a different team, that teams are now using AI.
Yeah, I've heard this too.
Cycle. Basically, you can put, if you're facing the Twins in a week, let's say, you take all, whatever 1,000 pitches Bailey Ober's thrown in his career, and you just throw it through AI and have it flag mechanically, if his arm slot is different, if his, hip movement is different. And then you look for patterns within that, because so much of what we think of as pitch tipping, it's so much more subtle than like what you may think of. It's like, I noticed that this guy taps his glove a little harder before he throws a changeup, or I noticed that his arm slot on a curveball is, like one fingernail length lower than it is on a fastball.
Can I give you an example? I heard the other day from a Twins minor league prospect that was working through something. They discovered the Twins minor league prospect was tipping his pitches.
Yeah, I know this, but go ahead.
Maybe okay. It was that.
It's funny.
It was that he was he was chewing his gum.
Yeah.
Did you hear about this?
I did.
that there was a pitcher who was chewing his gum when he was, he was chewing his gum when he was throwing a fastball, and he would quit chewing his gum when he was throwing something off speed, which what I've heard from some of other people is that is the sort of thing that is not uncommon. Like a pitcher, when they're throwing an off speed pitch, has to think about it more. They're trying to get the feel for it. Right. And so they do things with a fastball. It's just go back and wing it. Right.
And some pitches require throwing with a little more torque or throwing a little harder. And so you do things without even noticing in terms of your body or your mechanics, where you think you're just sort of mentally knowing you do it, but if your legs push off a little, but that's a great example.
The pitches that require more concentration, you act like you are concentrating more. You do something that concentrates more, and therefore you can kind of guess, oh, this is not going to be a fastball. Right?
Yeah, and so I think a lot of people, when they hear pitch tipping, and it can be this, but people think like, oh, there's a guy on second base signaling to the batter, or they figured out that he does something crazy where it's super noticeable. This stuff to the naked eye is not at all noticeable most of the time, the vast majority of the time. And great pitchers go through this. Johan Santana used to go through this for a stretch every season because he was so reliant on fastball changeup. And if you could identify a higher likelihood based on his mechanics or some tip that he was giving that he was going to throw a changeup, well, it suddenly went from being the best pitch in the world to being a really crappy fastball that could be hit for a homer.
That's right.
And so, I certainly believe the idea that Bailey Ober, and like you said, he struggled with this in the past, or it's been a topic with him in the past. What I also found interesting in the next couple of days after Bailey Ober's start is we were, in talking to him and other pitchers and talking to Baldelli, I think they believe that part of the extreme staff-wide problems this month, where they have like a 7-something ERA, and, I will note that like their secondary numbers, their FIP, their expected ERA, those are bad, but they are not nearly that bad. They are giving up an incredible number of hits on like decent pitches, out of zone pitches, 2-strike pitches that are still being hit hard. And then they are also just giving up a lot of balls in play that are going for hits because they're struck a little harder than you might expect. I get the sense that the Twins think Ober is not the only one going through this. In terms of, I hesitate to even call it pitch tipping. I think the phrase a lot of people use is, am I giving something away?
Sure.
Is there something I'm doing that maybe it could be as subtle as it's not even telling them what the pitch is. It's maybe making it more or less likely that they can count on seeing a pitch. Like we've figured out that instead of, he normally throws 25% changeups, but we've identified some things that as you watch it, you can say in your head, he's going to throw 50% changeups. And even something as subtle as that can make a difference between, a grounder up the middle being turned into an out and a grounder up the middle being hit an extra mile an hour and making it through. And so it definitely seems to me that the Twins believe, and they're not making excuses in the sense that they think they've pitched well this month. They haven't. Believe me, if they made that excuse, I would crap all over that. But I do believe it's possible that they've pitched poorly and it's become significantly more extreme in terms of the runs they've allowed because Ober and maybe a couple other pitchers have kind of gotten into a situation here where they're giving something away. And I will note that like the Twins have an entire staff, like multiple people behind the scenes, whose job it is to not only try to identify that stuff with other pitchers, like to try to say, is the guy we're facing on Tuesday giving anything away? But also to do research on their own pitchers to identify stuff. Like they have guys who are analyzing Bailey Ober to try to figure out almost like, can we catch this before another team takes advantage of it? That sort of thing. Yeah. So it will be interesting over the next several weeks, especially with Ober, but just staff wide, if some of the weirdness, like, boy, that seemed like a pretty decent pitch, and boy, they hit it hard, or it almost seemed like they knew that off-speed pitch was coming, 0-2 or whatever it is. Right. If that is a little less prevalent, and obviously at some point they're just going to have to pitch better too. But yeah, it's an interesting topic, and it's a topic that like it's not taboo in the sense that every team is trying to get these advantages, and it doesn't mean you're doing like nefarious things to try to get this. I mean, we always bring up Paul Molitor. Then Paul Molitor was an incredible baseball player, but another part of the Paul Molitor lore was, he could spot pitch tipping, he could spot everything, and he was doing it with his brains and his eyes, and so no one ever had a problem with it. Now there's technology involved to some extent, but it's still brains and eyes to implement it. It's not like you're not cheating in the sense that you're stealing information or anything. You're just observing, basically.
Yeah, there's a video going around about Alex Rodriguez talking about, here three easy things you can kind of do to see if somebody's tipping their pitches, or 3 easy ways to, and one of them was something simple like, he's got to grip the ball further in his palm, see where see where his hand is in his glove. Like, is his hand lower? So his hand is lower, so he's using just the 2 fingers for the fastball, or is it further into the glove because he's got to palm the ball a little bit? Like, it's just simple things like that are the sort of things that they are looking for that, obviously we who are not, our life is not dependent on hitting a fastball, are not necessarily keyed in on. So
yeah,
and I think that's true for a lot of the really good. I wouldn't be shocked if Barry Bonds has a lot of ideas of what pitch was coming based on what he was watching or not watching. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of it is pattern recognition. A lot of it is being able to eliminate one pitch. Like if Bailey Ober throws 5 pitches, but you, for whatever reason, have figured out on this 2-2 count, he's unlikely to throw this pitch. Then you only have to guess for 3 pitches instead of 4 pitches. To your point about the glove placement, and this is pretty common. I mean, this is prevalent. Guys who throw like split finger fastballs or splitters as a changeup, where you have to, I'm not going to like turn into a pitching show, but you got to get the ball between your fingers here. Hello, everybody. Deuces. It's not hard to do, but you actually have to press the ball into your fingers. And so to your point, 30 years ago, guys figured out that you could watch a pitcher very carefully, and he's got his glove, here, and you say like, boy, he's really digging into the glove there. And if he throws a splitter or he throws something that requires a special grip, you could literally see him sort of applying that grip to the point that for decades now, but there was a change at some point. Now pitchers who throw a splitter will always set up in their glove with the splitter grip. And then if they're not throwing a splitter, they will remove the splitter grip because it's less noticeable than trying to add the splitter grip.
Yeah,
so this is the type of stuff. And I'm sure there's levels to this that we are completely unaware of and will never understand, that a player can go, ooh, I just saw this. And like,
and it, by the way, go ahead.
When you see like Carlos Correa strike out, ground out, whatever it is, and then like walk back to the dugout and stop and whisper in somebody's ear in the on-deck circle. Some of that is just, hey, his slider looks good, be aware of this. Some of it can be, hey, watch his release point on this, or watch the way he's chewing his gum, or whatever it is. And this is just sort of the information that's flowing. But it's plausible to me, given that the pitching has not just been bad, it's been like insanely bad. And some of the numbers are kind of wonky within that. If you're trying to look at like batting average on balls in play and all that stuff, it does seem conceivable to me that there's something to this, but also realistically, it's on the Twins to fix that. Like there's nothing wrong with teams figuring stuff out like this. And so it's going to be on their coaches and on their pitchers to kind of, address these issues and clean up some of these mechanical things that are being noticed.
2 things on that both played into the Twins this week. The first is that Cody Clement, when the Twins won the game, stopped the losing streak with a 2-0 win. The second run came from a Cody Clemens home run. He basically said in the game in the interview afterwards, I was looking for a first pitch slider. I mean, he hammered it opposite field over the wall. That's not an easy thing to do, but he was looking for a first pitch slider. Now, I wonder how much of that has to do with like this guy likes to start me out with a slider, or whether it was, there's something tip was going on that I saw that a slider was coming and was able to do it. The second was that I ended up having a long conversation with Deshaun Kersey when I was there last weekend, where we were talking a little bit about the science of stealing bases, and in terms of trying to figure out what the pitch is going to be. That's another person who's very interested in what the pitch is going to be, right?
Because you want to run on non-fastballs, basically, or pitches that are not going to be thrown for strikes.
Right. He also said, sometimes you'll get a report on a pitcher like he gets you to a 2-strike count, he gets you ahead in the count, 1 ball, 2 strikes. He's going to throw something out of the zone, but he's going to spike it. Like he wants to keep it out of the zone. This is a strikeout pitch for him, but he wants to throw it nowhere near the zone. Well, that's the perfect pitch to run on, right? So you wait for that 1-2 count to be able to run on. So it was interesting.
You guys also talk. You talk tattoos and piercings too, right?
That's true. Yeah. I'm gonna get a little one across my neck here.
Okay.
Hat.
GATG for life. Something like that.
That's right.
I think how like bikers get like the heart and it says like mother. I think you should get one that just says Gleeman.
You ever seen the movie Baby Driver?
I have, yeah.
Okay, Baby Driver. There's a great scene in it where one of the criminals he's working with has a big neck tattoo that says hat with something with like a symbol or something after it, and he says, hat. And the guy says, yeah, it used to say hate, but I got too much crap for that. It like scared everybody.
Yeah.
so I
Hat.
changed it to hat. And Baby Driver says something like, and how's that working for you? And he says, who doesn't like hats?
It's true, but he only likes one hat. He doesn't like plural hats. He just likes hat, one hat. Okay. Yeah. I saw this conversation with Deshaun Kersey and John Bonus going on, and it took every ounce of energy I had to not just run over there, or at least the closest I can do to run over there, and just to be a fly on the wall of two, the better looking kind of bad boy,
Sure. Yeah.
Heartthrob type of,
Yeah.
what was the Tiger Beat kind of pin-up type of guys
That's
in
right.
that clubhouse.
And fast.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Both ridiculously fast and athletic.
Well, let me put it this way. He's like one of the 2 or 3 fastest guys on his team, and you're one of the 2 fastest guys on your team, John. It's either me or you.
That's true.
That's
true.
Let's see. I think I had one more thing, and then we can say goodbye to the people in video land. I was maybe going to talk about Jacob Mizorowski, but we talked about that on the Patreon side. If anybody wants my thoughts, I actually wrote about him. I'll put that up there in terms of any, not just for a young starting pitcher, but I'll say any starting pitcher. Right. I've never seen a higher level of raw stuff from a starting pitcher in a 6 inning, 7 inning start. Like just sustained, overpowering fastball, a great mid-90s slider, a slow curveball that was like just baffling to watch come in so slow. Right. And then a changeup that he basically threw twice and got on one of them. It's not even a good enough pitch in his mind to throw it that much. And he got Cody Clemens to swing at a ball that was in the other batter's box on it. Like, and then since then he's had another brilliant start
versus Skeens.
Yeah. And he's allowed like 3 hits in 18 innings or something like that. I mean, if this dude stays healthy, I've rarely been as impressed, and certainly never been more impressed by a young pitcher that I've seen in person facing the Twins or otherwise. So if you want to hear us give a little bit more info on him and watching him, we talked about that on the Patreon. And then the other thing is I met the man they call Big Dumper, which I know is your nickname in a lot of places, but Cal Raleigh, I had a chance to talk to him. I wrote about him for The Athletic as an MVP candidate. And the angle was kind of Joe Mauer is the last AL MVP catcher.
Oh,
so with Cal Raleigh in town, I asked him about that. And also I went into the Mariners clubhouse to talk to him, and he was good to talk to. And also in that Mariners clubhouse, I talked to Mitch Garver and Jorge Polanco and Donovan Solano. There's a whole Twins reunion in there going on. Mitch Garver is in fact his backup catcher and started yesterday and took a ball, I think, off his neck.
Did we get word on his health?
I think he's okay, but he did leave the game.
Yeah,
which required Raleigh coming to catch, and then they lost the DH. So yeah, I mean, Raleigh's putting up absurd numbers, and it was interesting to talk to him because the 2 things I tried to talk to him about were, how did you go from really good to this? And his point was basically just, adjustments and getting smarter and all this stuff, which, okay. And my other thing was, from a durability standpoint, each of the last 2 years, he's caught the most games in baseball. He's on pace for something similar to that this year, like 125, 135 starts, but also he's DHing almost every game he doesn't start behind the plate, which, I mean, we've seen over the years the Twins take the opposite approach. Like they just split time behind the plate. And most teams now do this. You rarely see catchers catch even 110 games now. And he's out there catching like 130 plus 30 starts at DH. And my question to him was like, how do you prepare for that? And also, are you worried August and September? Everybody's looking at his pace and, he's on pace for 65 homers. Well, yeah, but we know from catchers, you slow down. And he kind of talked about the work he puts in, like strength training and cardio and all that stuff during the off season. Here's what I'll leave you with, you fine folks. His nickname's Big Dumper because he's got a butt on him. That's why. I was in that clubhouse. I talked to him. I'm not going to tell you it's a small dumper.
Toned dumper? Is that what you're going to say?
I didn't see that much. He was clothed when I saw him, thankfully. But I wouldn't walk in and go, Yep, that's Big Dumper. That's got to be Big Dumper. Like, I wouldn't give him that nickname if he didn't already have that nickname, I guess. So that's the insight that I can offer from my clubhouse.
I also like that you published the story for him, and the traditional jinx / Aaron Gleeman jinx / reverse jinx ended up working. He ended up not getting hit basically the rest of that series.
No, he had 2 hits the next game after I published it. But yeah, he didn't homer again since that, which is a
homer again after that. Yeah,
a small victory for a guy who has 32 home runs.
Could you do a story on how much Bailey Ober stinks? Could you maybe come up with one of those? I'd appreciate that.
I have. That's the problem. I reject the jinxing premise. Here's the thing. If I had the power to jinx things, you'd be in trouble, John.
Story after story about how good John Bonus is.
Right. Think about this.
How much money he has.
What is the number one topic I have talked about over the last decade? Maybe you argue the Minnesota Twins, but I would say you. But it's always disparaging. So it's I've always got to go in the other direction. I've got the reverse jinx aspect. Oh, you're saying you're like thriving to the extent that I've reverse jinxed you?
Yes.
Let me say this, John. Do you know what you're doing right now? You're talking to me. That's your life. That is not thriving at all. I don't think anybody has ever described talking to me as like a good point of their life.
That is a good point. This is the penance I pay for the rest of my life. You do this
3 days a week. That's almost like a court-ordered restitution. Like, okay, for the next 10 years, you're going to talk to the biggest jerk 3 days a week, and we're going to record it.
Felt a little bit like house arrest. I'm not going to lie. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I put myself on house arrest for like 20 years now. It works out really well. Okay. We will be back here, same audio and or video time, same place next Friday. But if you would like more Gleeman and the Geek between now and then, we always do a Monday morning episode to recap the weekend, which is now going to be in Detroit, which is going to be a very interesting, very key series.
Right.
And hopefully we'll have some more clarity on Royce Lewis at that point, and perhaps some more clarity on some other injury situations. And then we also are going to do a Wednesday show. Maybe we'll do a mailbag we haven't done for a while. Maybe we just, I don't know, we'll see. We'll react to news and notes and stuff. But if you want more Gleeman and the Geek in your life, go to patreon.com/Gleeman and sign up. And even if you just sign up now for the next month, that'll take you through the trade deadline, which is probably good, bad, or indifferent. You know, a point of the season that you're going to want to listen to our reaction to news and or non-news as the last couple trade deadlines, I bet.
And if you want to relive this past hour and a half with the very best clips of Gleeman and the Geek, go to Gleeman and the Geek YouTube, youtube.com/@Gleeman and the Geek.
We can find
you can subscribe to us. Yeah, you can subscribe to our page here, and we'll be putting out 1-2 clips pretty much every day, both some short ones, some long ones, etc. So stay on top of your Twins takes that way and share them with your friends.
And thank you to our sponsors here. Obviously, Blackstack, who is our presenting sponsor. So big thank you to them.
Yeah, thank you to them. They are now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. So stop by for your favorite liquor store or the Blackstack tap room to grab your favorite brew or try something new. Also, the rest of the sponsors are Hims Hair. We had IDEOU jumped in today. We had True Classic Teas, and we had Factor Meals. Keeping this free for everybody. So,
all right. Goodbye, everybody.
We'll talk to you later. Bye. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more for another. Just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Gleeman and the Geek.